This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And this week, I am sharing what would normally be a Patreon-exclusive episode of a show with everyone. We have officially wrapped up our Skeleton Crew after show, because the show, as you may or may not know, has ended. And I'm sharing that full season series look back with you. Enjoy. A test for the best? Going west?
Better than the rest.
Why are we so unhinged?
I think it's our beverages.
Caffeinated beverages, for the record, because it's 9 a.m.
Yes.
So we did something pretty, and it ended up being pretty fun last night, which is we ended up watching the last half of Skeleton Crew all in one sitting.
Yeah. That wasn't the plan.
No, our stupid internet Wi-Fi, whatever it is, didn't want to work the other night, so we couldn't break it up into smaller pieces. But it was actually, and we'll talk more about this, it was actually really fun to watch those 4 episodes all at a time, because like as episodic as they are, you do get to see like the very rapid, you know, progression of like developing relationships and things like that, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So yeah, welcome back to Ske-lit-on Crew, our Skeleton Crew after show, and the last one for now. You know, depending on whether or not they make more Skeleton Crew, we'll see. So we've already talked about all of the individual episodes, and so for this one, we rewatched the whole show again. So we've now seen every episode twice. And we're going to talk about the season/show as one big story. What do you think about that?
I like it.
You got to drink more of your caffeine.
I know.
You get on it. We're podcasting. We got to be on. 1, 2, 3, drink. Okay, that was too much. Oh boy. So I don't know where to start because it's a lot happens in these 8 episodes, especially as we've witnessed over the last few days rewatching this. I will say though, it was just as satisfying of an ending this time, if not more so, because you're kind of like, instead of going through the whole journey in however many weeks it was, we went through it in a few days, and it was very fun.
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah, I think this rewatch reinforced for me just how special this show is.
Yeah.
I think this show really just stands out among all of the Star Wars Disney Plus offerings.
I would agree. And I haven't really, and we can start, breaking down and trying to process why that is. Because I'm not 100% sure for me why that is. I think we've talked about this already, but part of it for me was like the detachment from the larger story. Like this is its own little story happening. Obviously, other things are happening around the galaxy at this time, but we don't really care about that because we don't have to care about that. We care about, these characters and what's happening here. And I really love the pirate stuff too. It's like that's like a whole other like focus that the show had that we haven't really gotten extensively before. We've gotten pieces of it. And you've got like Hondo and all that in other places. But like this, like there was no need to like, and I obviously don't have this perspective, so I can't speak to it. But like you could potentially come into this show not really knowing a lot about Star Wars and be totally content.
I think so. I think so. I mean, if you think about all the different shows, like if you think in the live action, this one is probably the one where that is maybe most the case.
Yeah. Mandalorian, at least the first season.
Yeah,
you might be okay.
Yeah, you'd be okay. Yeah, I mean, the reason that season was as big as it was a large part because of that.
Yeah, right.
Acolytes, maybe somewhere in the middle. That starts to fade as you get towards the end.
Right, yeah.
But Skeleton Crew, yeah, you really... Yeah, you can go into this with not a ton of Star Wars back knowledge.
Right. Because, like, think about, like, the first couple episodes, for example. Like, you're on this planet. It feels pretty, like, normal, like, sci-fi. Like, there's nothing, like... It's obviously set in the Star Wars universe, but there's nothing, like super niche Star Wars that you're like, I don't understand that. Because all of us are learning about this new planet, their culture, what is going on, at the same time. And then you get to like the part where they're like, they bring out the Old Republic credits and they're like, where did you get those? And all you really need to know is, oh, that's not something that you normally see outside of this planet. That's different. That's interesting. That's dangerous,
Yeah.
And then like you get like, you see the Jedi through Wim's eyes, which is like, he's seeing like these like distant like heroes. And like, I would love to be that. I would love to be something like that. But you don't really need to know any of the history of what the Jedi are.
Yeah.
And we like that. I like looking at the potential entry points in Star Wars because there are plenty of them. But the more of those you study, the more the ones that aren't entry points, Ahsoka, for example, really, really stand out as like, no, you cannot watch this having never seen Star Wars before.
Right.
And that's not like a dig at Ahsoka in this context. That's just like Ahsoka is something that you're only going to watch if you know who these characters are already, ideally. And if you don't, you might not really understand. You get it. We don't have to.
Yeah.
We don't have to dive into that right now. But the fact that like the world building, so much of it happens on this planet in particular, like you could have seen every Star Wars and you don't know anything about this planet.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone's kind of on the same level in that regard, and that's nice. And of course there are plenty of like what we're gonna call Easter eggs that like if you understand that reference, that's pretty cool because you've seen that Star Wars thing and you know what that's from. But like again, it'll go right over your head, but it's not gonna be like, oh, I don't get that, so the story doesn't make sense. Which I know we've talked about this, but that really stood out to me as something that like Star Wars kind of really needs to do better with in a lot of contexts. Like obviously if you have Bo-Katan in season 3 of The Mandalorian, that is what it is. But like, if you've never seen the holiday special and you don't know what that is, you don't understand that little part that's like just like inserted in there and like it goes over your head because it doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
It's very what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Welcoming is not the right word.
Accessible?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, why is our third co-host on her back right now? She was on her back kicking her legs in the air. I don't know what that was about. It was very distracting. Accessible. Thank you. Well, see, what would I do without you? I've been talking a lot, and I'll let you talk in a second. But I think something that I hope future creators and, the business side of Star Wars TV learns from this is that the more accessible it is to a larger audience, probably the better off you are. It's going to depend on what it is. But this is a pretty good example of, like, you don't have to lean on almost 50 years of Star Wars lore to build a story. Like, obviously there are parts of it that are going to be in there. But to make it, easy to dive into for someone who's never seen Star Wars, like, that's someone's going to see that on Disney Plus and be like, oh, maybe I'll watch that. I've heard that it's cool.
Yeah. I think I'm going to sort of reiterate something that I said on Clashing Sabers when we were doing our look back at Skeleton Crew recently, is that of the live action shows that we've gotten, this is the first one where it really feels like the storytelling is blazing new trails.
Yes.
A lot of the shows that we have gotten have centered either explicitly or otherwise on familiar characters, Obi-Wan, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, etc.
Yeah.
Mandalorian sort of starts on this virgin soil and then kind of gradually turns, in a different direction and brings in, taps more into pre-existing Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Before this show, Acolyte was the closest in terms of the high, we got this brand new purity we've never seen on screen before and all of that. But then it's still like Jedi, Sith, all that, and, Plagueis, Yoda, etc. But this show really just, I think, like, the trope of, like, big galaxy, small galaxy is a little bit overplayed. But man, like, the galaxy really does feel big in this show.
Yes.
Because you get all the, you get At-Aten, and you get this, this kind of world that you've never seen. And then you get all the lore about the, the jewels of the Old Republic and the Mint, and it's run by a droid. And, so you get this kind of environment and this type of society that we really hadn't gotten before. And then, like you were saying, like, all the pirate stuff, where, again, like, we've seen pirates in Star Wars. Like, we got Hondo, we got Gorian Shard in The Mandalorian. But then, like, you go to the pirate port, and you have the code, and the resort, and, like, you get all this stuff. It's like, oh, like, the whole pirate kind of society ecosystem thing that we don't really get. Is really great.
I loved that. I really loved that, because it was kind of like that feeling of, like, oh, this is just a part of Star Wars that's always existed that we haven't really gotten to explore yet.
Yeah.
And, like, the code and stuff like that kind of, like, world building is, like, you sometimes wonder, like, can Star Wars continue to grow and expand? Well, this is how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all those. I don't know if I talked about it when we did our finale episode, but, like, all that stuff, because we were talking about, like, the mysteries around At-Aten. So maybe I'm repeating myself a little bit here. I don't know. But, like, so much of what Skeleton Crew does with that, with putting in all that stuff, like, it feels reminiscent of your, like, you fought in the Clone Wars, like, the Imperial Senate, the regional governors, and you're like, what's that? It doesn't take the time to, like, give you the Wook entry about, like, what that means.
Yeah.
But it's thrown there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's neat. Like, what's going on there? Like, what's the history? What's the story there?
Yeah. Yeah, like, someone give us an encyclopedia entry on this at some point. I don't know why that's so hard to get out of my mouth. Yeah, no, I love that, because what you're doing there is you're building foundations for another creator to pick up that little piece and run with it. And again, that's how Star Wars continues to expand in the ways that you want it to.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a set handful of characters whose stories can keep expanding. You have to, like, look beyond that.
Right.
I enjoyed Ahsoka, but it's that kind of thing where it's like a lot of these characters, like we didn't need more of their stories beyond this, you know, to a certain point. Like, we were fine. And yeah, we're going to different places, but it doesn't really do a lot to, like, expand what we know about certain things.
Yeah, it's so, like, Ahsoka is one of the most, like, jarring one of these in this regard, because it takes the bold move of literally taking us to another galaxy. But and yet it's like, new galaxy, same as the old galaxy, you know?
We go to a new galaxy, and it's just Ezra and Thrawn, like we were like before.
Yeah, and it's like, here's Rock Planet. Like here's another one.
It's nothing new.
Yeah.
It's nothing new.
And then, like, here or not, but you go to Ad-Atten, and you're like, wow. And it's funny, like, it even does the, like, it manages to feel refreshing, even when it's still, like, you know, the trope of the hidden planet is, like, very, like, arguably overworn in latter-day Star Wars, because you now have Ad-Atten, but then you also had Tanalorr, you had Planet X, Exegol. We've gotten a lot of these recently. Star Wars storytelling arguably over-relies on this right now.
Yeah.
And yet, nevertheless, they do it with Ad-Atten in a way where you're like, oh, you know, like, it feels different, even though this is, like, the fifth planet you've seen that's like, oh, it's surrounded by a thing that'll kill you if you try to fly through it.
Well, because there's this element of mystery, not just of why didn't we know about this planet, or we need to get to this planet, but why is this planet hidden? What's going on here? Who is the supervisor? Why do we have this mint? Who's tried to go after it in the past? You know, it just keeps building and building and building, and as the show goes on, you have more and more and more questions. So it's not just, oh, here's this mystery place we want to get to or get back to or whatever. It's, but why? But why? You know?
Yeah.
In like a much more interesting way. Yeah, my brain is like wanting to talk about Ahsoka. I'm like, we'll do that in some other context at some other point. We're not going to do it now because all I'll say to like satisfy this thread that my brain wants to go down is going to an entirely new galaxy felt very underwhelming to me, but that's a whole other thing. And here we are just going to one planet that we've already been to before. It just makes me think of like in the penultimate episode where he's like, the ship is the key. And he says that like 5 times or some iteration of it. And you're like, what do you mean? But like that keeps you like wondering like, what does that mean? And it's because you can get through the barrier because it's, you know, from the planet. It's so good. Okay. So we'll start here and we'll keep going. Is there anything, and it's okay if the answer is no, but is there anything that you noticed this time around that you missed before? Not counting the parts where we both realized we had been asleep before and missed certain things. Was it the 3rd or 4th episode? I missed at least half of it, and I didn't realize that, and it's because I had fallen asleep, and it's fine. I didn't miss anything. It ended up being fine, but oops.
There were things that I paid attention to maybe more this time around.
Okay.
So, for example, one of them being the score. I think the score for Star Wars things is generally something that is, especially on first watch, is usually just like in the background. Oh yeah, there's music, but you're kind of watching the story.
Yeah.
But this time around, it really stood out to me in a lot of ways. Like it's a really well done score.
Yeah, it is.
It's one of, I would say, like, again, among like the Star Wars shows, I think it's one of the stronger scores.
I would agree.
I mean, I loved from the beginning whenever, like, for Star Wars shows, the sort of opening little like thing never usually does much to me, where it's like, you know, you see all the helmets and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like usually that's just like it's you know, like 7 seconds that passes by.
Yeah.
But the way that they have that little riff on the theme where it's like the harps and then there's like the, I don't know if it's I don't know what instrument, like the xylophone or like whatever in there. Like that always gets me every time.
Well, then you finally get that in the second to last episode when they finally pass the barrier and they see the planet. They play that and you're like, oh, I know what that is. Yeah,
like it's a very sweet little, you know, leitmotif.
It is.
And I like that. And then just like other bits of music throughout.
Yeah.
kind of jumped out at me again because you know what where the story is going with the beat, so you can focus on some of that other stuff. Yeah. Some of that stuff shines more versus when you're first watching, you're just like, what's gonna happen? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And all of that. So that really jumped out. This is, I guess, another like thing that I didn't like. Again. It's like you see it, but again, because you're just kind of you're in story mode, you're just sort of watching it, and you don't get to like focus on those details. But I thought about last night we were watching, we did the back half, and so you start with the episode when they're on Lanupa, and they're looking for Tak Reynard's sort of hidden like vault or whatever, layer or whatever, and there's like look for the symbol, and it sort of jumped out to me this time how the symbol is like faintly Nile-esque.
Oh,
do you notice that? Because it's kind of,
I did not notice that.
It's got sort of like the lightning bolt thing.
Okay.
Again, it's not the same.
Yeah.
The design is a little bit different, but it's got a little bit of that same idea there.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
Which again may have just been like. Maybe that was just sort of like a deliberate sort of not necessarily saying like, oh, he's like Nile or whatever, but just saying like, he's a pirate, they were pirates, so maybe that's just sort of like a nod to sort of like a sort of legacy type thing. Like that. But I just noticed that, like, again, I don't know if they like were deliberately looking at like High Republic stuff and then did that, but yeah. I just thought it was kind of neat. It's in the same way that, like, in Jedi Survivor, when you're looking at the, oh my God, what's their name? The Bedlam Raiders. Their symbol sort of looks like the eye of the Nile symbol. Now, it looks that way because that's what, when you see them going into Tanalorr, the whatever the thing that they pass through kind of looks like that also. Yeah. But I think it's not I don't think it's 100% a coincidence that it also kind of looks like the eye.
Right.
So yeah, I like those little things.
And that's like, it's like listening to a song more than once. It's like when you first listen to the song, you're listening very surface level because you're like, oh, what is this about? What are the lyrics going to be? What's the bridge going to be like? But then like you listen to it again and you hear, oh, that was a really cool when that beat dropped, or it was cool when they did this, that's the value of rewatching. And not everything has the same level of like rewatchability. I would say that like at this point, I don't feel the need to rewatch Skeleton Crew again anytime soon.
Yeah, same.
Because it is kind of like when you see it a couple of times, there's not as many surprises, but I will look forward to rewatching it again in the future when I haven't seen it in a while, because it is just a really good, feel good, interesting, fun show on top of everything else. Was there anything I noticed that I didn't before? I mean, like the stuff that I missed the first time. Sometimes I'm tired and I lay my head down on the pillow and I fall asleep.
I know.
Listen. Yeah, I know you know, but they don't know. They don't live here. I hope not. I think one thing that really stood out to me, and I like alluded to this earlier, was like, one thing that like I'd kind of forgotten about, I'll go down this route. I forgot how mean Fern was in the beginning. Like I forgot, like, because I just like fell in love with her and I'm like, oh, she's so great. I forgot how mean she was in the first episode, especially. Like, God. But then being able then having like remembered that, to see her like development throughout the show, like it makes it so much better, because like she wasn't being like that because she's like a cold, not caring person, like that's not why she was like that. She's putting on a front for a reason, and she has her vulnerable moments. It's the caffeine. And you kind of like get more insight into like who she is and what matters to her. And then you get that last episode where she's like, trying to convince her mom to shut down the thing, and it's just completely different. And like that's also just a very good general sign of storytelling, is like the characters at the end are the same characters, but they're also not. They've all changed drastically for different reasons, and all of them, they did a really good job of all of that. And then Jod, just seeing his stuff all throughout, and like it was so much more obvious to me, you know, because we've seen it before, but like from the beginning, like, oh, he doesn't actually care at all. Because there were moments where like they kind of convinced you otherwise, but like, no, you kind of see right through it from the beginning, and it's so well done that like there's a reason that you are questioning throughout. What else? I think especially again watching all these 4 episodes right in a row, because I had talked about before how like, oh, like sometimes like not every kid really gets the chance to shine, but I think like if you watch it as an entire piece, that all kind of balances out. Like if you're looking at that episode to episode, of course it's not fairly balanced, but if you're looking at the whole thing, which we are right now, I think it's pretty well done.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. I think over the course of the show, every kid is given their sort of moment to shine, and so I think it's very well done as sort of ensemble storytelling. You know, you start like Wim, sort of your gateway into this world. You sort of see everything kind of through his eyes at first, and then you get, you know, like you're on at Akron, and you get your time with Neil, and then we're on Lanupa, and KB kind of gets her moment, and then Fern sort of has moments sort of sprinkled throughout. That are really good. And yeah, like you said, I think one of the nice things of being able to watch the whole show in a relatively compressed amount of time, as opposed to, you know, 1 episode a week, is getting to see the growth and the evolution of all the characters, especially the kids.
Right. Yeah.
Of getting to see, you know, Wim going through this journey of like, you know, he's reading these stories, and you know he's got this, you know, this notion about like Jedi and Sith and like adventure and all of that, and then he gets into the galaxy and sort of has this realization of like, oh, you know, like things are a little bit more complicated and all that. You know, he has that line when they're getting chased by the trash crabs of like. I don't remember the exact line, but it's like, why am I always so bad at picking the good guys?
Yeah.
So like he has that moment where he realizes that like not everything is what it seems on the surface, and like people you think you can trust, you can't necessarily trust.
Yeah.
But then ultimately he sort of comes around to still, you know, reaffirming like the idea of like good guys and all of that, right? Like because he gets to the end, and you know the New Republic and all of that. So. And you know, with Fern also, like you talked about, like the way she is at the beginning of the show, and like her growth, like her journey of being more like trusting and being more open and being more vulnerable and more accepting. You know, she has to go through that with, you know, she has to go through that with KB. She also kind of goes through that with Neil. I think that was something like in that episode that I didn't really kind of pay attention to. Was like her and Neil.
Yeah.
Because when they're climbing and she's like, can't you go faster? And he's like, no, like my legs are too short. Like I literally can't reach. And then like, you know, they finally figured out when she gets like the rope and she's kind of like pulling him up.
Yeah.
So that's sort of her kind of moment there, realizing, oh, she's like, not everybody's on her level.
Yeah.
And like even, you know, KB has that line about her about like, oh, she's not always living in reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like particularly when she's with Wim, I think she kind of positions herself as like the realist, the pragmatist, and he's sort of the one who's got his head in the clouds.
Yeah.
But then you sort of see, oh, she also has some blind spots too, that she's got to kind of learn to deal with.
Yeah.
So I think all the kids are just given these great moments, and what's nice, particularly about them as sort of a Jod as sort of a foil to them is, you know, they obviously live these very sheltered lives, you know, on At-Aten, and they go into the galaxy, and then they discover just all the sort of complexities of the galaxy. And, you know, again, like all the bad people, the pirates, you know, all like the people you can't trust. And you see all these different ways that these characters react to this, right? Because like you have the At-Aten adults who, you know, their response to the galaxy out there is, we just got to close ourselves off.
Yeah.
The galaxy is dangerous. We need to keep up this barrier. We need to stay within. We need to follow the rules, and we'll be fine. Like we'll keep all the bad stuff out, and we'll just kind of keep going in our little society here. Jod's response, right, is to lean into the cruelty of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Right. He has the whole line about like the galaxy is this dark place with just these pinpricks of light. Right. So he experiences the cruelty of the galaxy at a very young age.
Yeah.
And the lesson that he derives from is it's dog eat dog. Look out for yourself. Nobody else matters. Right. Just like make sure you're set. Like kill who you have to kill. Right. Game who you have to game. It doesn't matter. The kids go also through this experience of like, the world is not black and white. It's dangerous. There are these, right, like there's these shades of gray, but they come out of it with still, with still a belief in and reaffirmation of the goodness that is out there. Yeah. Again, the fern line, which feels a lot like the sort of thesis of the show of like everywhere we went, even the worst places, they were still good people.
Yeah.
So they go through the journey and they're a little bit wiser because of it. They're a little bit more mature because of it. Yeah. But they have not fallen into the trap of either of their parents of like, let's just stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not out there and protect ourselves from it. Or Jod's sort of cynical, nihilistic sort of like, selfishness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like they get to this point where like, oh, like I can think differently than the people I used to look up to, or looked up to for a time, or like my parents.
Yes, which is very Star Wars. It's like breaking that right. It's Luke who's being told like you got to kill your dad. There's no other way. It's like you either kill him or you become a servant of the Emperor. And he's like, nope, there's a third way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's another path that you have missed that I'm going to figure out. And these kids are doing the same thing, right? They're finding that third option between the way that their parents have been doing things and other generations in Manhattan and the way that somebody like Jod has been doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, it feels so Star Wars, but not so cliche that you're like, oh, I saw that coming,
Yeah.
Oh, and that last shot of Wim looking at the ships still got me. The second time around, I was like, man, that is the perfect ending to a Star Wars.
Yeah.
Again, we're just assuming that this is the end of Skeleton Crew, but like, if it were, and it's quite honestly likely that it is, 10 out of 10 no notes. I haven't felt, and I know we talked about this, but I haven't felt this positive about the ending of a Star Wars in quite a while, because it's not doing is it's not taking the effort to set up something that may or may not happen later. It's just closing off its own thing. Whatever happens in the future, like this is the end of this story. Here you go. Again, something I think Star Wars can learn from Skeleton Crew. There's a lot Star Wars can learn from the show.
Yeah.
They really picked the perfect creators to do this. Somehow they just really, really nailed it. Oh God, what? I mean, like, I think like we've really summed up our feelings on the show as a whole, which is like, it did so many things well that worked, and it feels so Star Wars, but also new at the same time, which is what really these shows need to be more of, is like Star Wars, but different. Different is not bad. New things, new ideas, new ways of telling stories, not bad. You have to try things. Like if they hadn't tried Skeleton Crew, we wouldn't have, all these opportunities to do things kind of like this in the future. Yeah. The dog is being really cute right now.
She is.
She was sleeping on my foot. Anything else?
I don't think so. This is like, again, given the reality of streaming and the economics of it all and the direction that a lot of these large companies have been taking in terms of, where they're investing their production dollars, we've probably seen the end of Skeleton Crew.
But that's okay.
Yeah. But also I could do like 10 seasons of this show.
That too.
It could just be these adventures and, like little pirate things or whatever. Obviously, you have the you have the fact that like the kids are kids, and
you don't want a Stranger Things.
Yes, the plasma runs out very fast, in your hourglass, and you don't want the situation where like half your cast is married, but they're playing like 14-year-olds.
God.
So that's the danger, and so you'd have to like if you like, I mean, again, it's not gonna happen for that reason. Like you would have to find a way to like do some time jumps or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, like I would take like 10 seasons of Skeleton Crew and just like these kids and their hijinks and like thwarting Jod, like all that stuff, like almost like vague, like faintly sort of a series of unfortunate events-esque, like where he takes the Olaf role.
Yeah.
And they keep just uncovering his latest scheme and busting it up. Like I would do 10 seasons of that.
Or resurrect Rangers of the New Republic and just like they're just fighting pirates all the time. Like, come on, you can do it. They're not going to, but they could. Amazing show. I really don't have any complaints about it. Any minor complaints that I had, I've already shared. If you're on our Patreon, you can listen to that, all of that. But I'm sorry to see it end. I really am.
Me too.
Like, and even like this is the last time we're going to be talking about it, in this format. Probably forever. If there are ever books that somehow connect, well, we'll figure out a way. But
yeah, this Skeleton Crew has been one of the bigger shockers in Star Wars in a while. You
were so skeptical. You were not looking forward to it. In the sense that like you were kind of just like, I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, I spent so much time, being the Skeleton Crew truther, like not really being sure this show was real. Because it's just like it got like you kept getting like production's been delayed. It's been okay, like is this real? And then we got the first teasers and the trailers, and I'm like, I don't know about the like this doesn't feel like it's for me. Again, like the vibe and what their inspiration is and what they're talking about. I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know if like I'm the target audience for this. And then the show comes and it's just like, it's like wow, like it's like. I mean, it both is exactly what it was advertised to be, but it's also more than what it was advertised to be.
Exactly.
And so, I'm so happy with what we got.
And it's been very fun discussing a show with you that you actually enjoyed.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Also, your caffeine is kicking in, love.
Yes.
On that note, we should record another podcast episode while you're up and going. This has been so fun. Thank you to all of our patrons thank you to all of our patrons. I'm gonna have to edit that. Damn it. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting Ske-lit-on Crew by giving your dollars and listening and leaving your comments. We don't know. I would love to be able to announce the name of our Andor show, but we're going to have to work a little harder on this name because we can't really do a lit pun this time. We'll figure it out, but we'll let you know. So if you want to know in advance more about our Andor after show, which will start in April when the show comes back for season 2, patreon.com/StarWarsLeBon. Well, I guess we'll see you on another show.
Yeah, see you then. Stay cool, people.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Montum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack and Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.